Good evening, everybody. We'll wait a moment for the stream. Okay, so once again, a very good evening to you. We have just seen the recording of the Švanda Theater production AI, when a robot writes a play. And let me introduce our guests. We'll be discussing not just what we have seen, but we'll also discuss artificial intelligence. On my left, Rudolf Rosa, who is a computational linguist and robopsychologist at the Mathematics Physics Department of Charles University and head of research of the project. Rudolf. The next guest, in a way, he has nothing to do with the project, but he is a special guest, nevertheless. Jan Romportl, cyber scientist and philosopher and director of the Artificial Intelligence Center, Czech Republic. Well, I was just passing by. Then Daniel Hrbek, who is the director of the production and also the director of the Švanda Theater, and David Košťák, the dramaturge of the Švanda Theater. Not sure if the mics are on. Yeah. They were not on. So let me start by asking Rudolf, your Facebook says, Rudolf, you, Rosa. What does it mean, the you? It's a joke, in fact. But when I was a high school student, I used RUR. It's a kind of nickname, so when I got this project, I was very pleased. And I'm not sure, you haven't mentioned this project was organized 100 years after the first production of the Karel Čapek play RUR, a play about robots. So now you have mentioned RUR after 100 years. So how do you see this Karel Čapek play, you cyber experts and also theater experts, because it's a fundamental Czech play? Well, for myself, I'm not such a theater expert, but I'm a fan of Karel Čapek, the writer and playwright, and a sci-fi fan. So I read the play recently and I'm fascinated how topical it is, because the topic can be interpreted in a different way today. But there is a warning by Karel Čapek in RUR and in his other plays. Maybe we haven't learned a lesson. He warned us, and now many things are happening. If I may, I haven't read RUR for many years. It's, in fact, Rossum's Universal Robots. I heard a recording as a child, an LP recording. I was really scared. And although I love Karel Čapek, well, I guess as a playwright, he's not so good as a writer. Maybe David will say more. But Karel Čapek knew what he wanted to write, but in the plays, it's not quite what I'd expect. There are many ideas, many topics, and I don't see people in it so much. So I'd say that this is a symbolic follow-up. And in the play written by AI, together with David Košťák, the dramaturge, There are some topics which also are present in RUR, and they are also present in this play, so that's the main relationship or link. Of course, there's a difference between a director and a dramaturge, because the deficit of the, let's say, dramatic situation in Čapek, for me as a dramaturge, it's a drama of the topic, and all this also emerged in our debates about this project, and it was also seen while we were working on the play. So even Čapek's plays can address the present-day viewer and open topics for discussion. That's why we are here. Jan Romporto. As I was passing by, as I said, I was not quite ready. I read RUR when I was a high school student, so I'll wait for the next part. The premiere took place 4 months ago, and that was a culmination of the first stage of the research, because now we are having the second stage, I guess. After 4 months, now you can look at it with a kind of detachment. So after 4 months, how do you see this first half of the project and some outcomes? For me, I was very surprised by the material we received, because I expected it would be a bit silly, perhaps, and for me personally, what was really interesting was how some things could be turned into topics, how they can be treated. So the detachment, well, during rehearsals, I sort of got away from the text, and I began to approach it as a text written by a human being. And I forgot about the deficits, the shortcomings, which turned up during rehearsals. So it was quite a painful process, the making of this production, and I thought I would never forget it. But today I feel I'm watching something that has nothing to do with me. That's about all. But that's quite normal after every opening premiere. Once, you know, it's put on, you look forward to the next production, and this is a closed affair. So for me, it's much more interesting to debate it and to carry on with the research. How far can it get AI? How far can it get? It's very important to name these stages. At first, we wanted to make a kind of inversion. A robot will write a play about Karel Čapek, and then we realized that the software or robot, whatever, still has shortcomings. So, in fact, what we wanted to do, we simplified it, we simplified the inputs. We generated situations, or dialogues rather, about 2 characters. The shortcoming of the computer is it generates a text based on literary verbal associations, not on spatial ideas. So when, in fact, this expectation was put down by us, we could see there were situations that could be interpreted. What I really miss is the human being and the need of dialogue. when you develop a play with an author, an inexperienced playwright, then there is a motivation put into the text, and with the dramaturge it's developed. You cannot do this with a robot, because you write, this is bad, so new material is generated, and some things may be right. But of course we cannot argue about the text with a robot. But now the program is developing, we are teaching the robot some situations, so maybe soon the robot will argue with us. And let me add that the play you have seen, the text out of 90%, it's really created by AI, and 10% is a human intervention. This human, David Košťák, I'm sure we'll get to it and what it means in real life. So it's maybe the most successful attempt in this genre, what you have just seen. So I don't think this has been done anywhere else. So the whole team is to be praised. And just very fast, the genesis in Prague, there's this man, Tomáš Studeník, he calls himself city hacker, and he came with the idea to celebrate the centennial of RUR with a play written by artificial intelligence. So he got us all together. We have a team of about 12 people, theater academy, Švanda Theater, dramaturgist from another theater, Vila Štvanice. So a team from various disciplines, and it's interesting for us to have this contact with other type of thinking. Yes, it is interesting for us as well, because we thought, let's generate a screenplay, and we'll see. When we talk to the theater people, we thought this is good, and they thought it was no good, and we thought this is terrible, and they said, no, it's good. So they said we can use it. In fact, we have been discussing this for 2 years, and we have found a common language, so you know, we can discuss it. But the first 6 months, we talked about the screenplay and so on. We thought, well, now the screenplay is ready, and now they will just do the acting, but no, it was only sort of half-baked. When I look at it and I know more about it, I can see that the text was generated only in form of dialogues. So 90% were generated by AI, and then there was the production itself that was really a lot of work, so that it made sense. Or well, when you do a play, the character says something but can think something else. So on stage, the subtext is more important. So it's not what the person says, but what the person does, and each piece of dialogue can be interpreted. And when in the text you don't have the inner continuity, then that's a problem for actors, not just in terms of interpretation, but also in order to remember the text. So here it's very, very complicated. That was one of the biggest problems, to really learn it, because it's not written by a human being, and it was also reflected in the actor's work. Yes, also in the freedom of interpretation. That was extremely difficult in rehearsals. As a dramaturg, as I was working on the text, I chose what I could interpret, and then the director has an idea, actors have ideas. So all of these ideas can be applied to the text, but the fact, in fact, in the theater it's difficult to decide what's true, what's right. Here, in this case, there were so many mysteries or enigmas, and we had to agree on them so that we don't make a mess out of it in people's heads. Jan Romberto, you saw the production 4 months ago, and I thought you were quite enthusiastic. So maybe, haven't you changed your mind after 4 months? Yes, I liked it then, and I like it now. And what has happened during the time, now we are now getting to the AI part of the debate. So I'll make a spoiler. AI, it's a neural network, linguistic model, and the play was written by GPT-2, a model which was in fact made in 2002. So it can generate this. We can speak about the linguistic model and AI. And OpenAI is a company that's creating the model in 2019. And in 2020, they came up with a more modern model, GPT-3, which is in fact much bigger by 2 orders. And that's quite, it's really different. So it can't even be compared with GPT-2. It's incredible and has huge consequences for many things we do. So in February, I started working with GPT-3. In 2002, we have a system for the detection of fake news, and we could see what GPT could do. It can speak Czech. That's a great quality. Then it doesn't have to be translated from English to Czech. It's better in English than in Czech. And what's also interesting, and I would like to see the impact on the theater part, it generates bizarre things, repetitions, and that's great material for you. But GPT-3, that would be boring, like a soap opera. It would be so close to reality that it would be scary. And then it would be a new type of work for you, because you staged the play, based it on the bizarre elements. So GPT-3, for me, that's a real breakthrough after this opening. Would you like to work on it? Yes. In September, we asked for access to GPT-3. We don't have it yet. GPT-2 is available on the internet. You can download it, but GPT-3, you have to write a request. You have to write what you want to use it for, and you only get a remote access. So we don't know if OpenAI will give it to us or not. Well, in fact, we have contracts and everything. It's waiting for a signature. So now we have an intermediary. You should really wait. We are trying testing GPT-3 in the Czech language, and GPT-2 the model generated a text in English, which meant that you could see the English subtitles. They are the original. And then it was translated into Czech, that we corrected mistakes. And now we want to train GPT-3 to speak Czech. We used some text, we used some news, politicians arguing and so on. But we hope we'll do it. And GPT-3 also has an open source variety. So we believe, we plan that in spring next year there will be the premiere of another play. We hope that it will also be written by AI. The text will be more dramatic, and we expect it will be better. We'll have a better model generated in Czech and so on. So we'll see, or you will see, in the spring. I remember when we had the first debate, I said that in the future it can be used for soap operas, TV series that we often see, you know, the various soap operas, Czech TV. If you close your eyes and if you just listen, don't watch it, you will not get far from what you have seen. But when you see the image, when you don't see the image, then sometimes the dialogues in soap operas are so bizarre. And the biggest drama is someone forgot to buy the bread. So in GPT-3, when you generate something, it just confirms what I think. In the theater, you need things that are not said, really. Many things that are not there, and there is some tension. So, yes, it's also related to what Rudolf said. They thought it wouldn't be usable, but we liked it. Within the software, I think the errors are in fact original. A real living writer would not write something like that. So the language of this robot, when the robot gets realistic, but you cannot interpret it, for me it's very interesting theatrically. That's how I approached the brief. The software, as I said, uses associations. So we made some stage remarks. I could already see some errors at the beginning, and deliberately I started the situation. What are you doing here? All robots should be plugged in, because I wanted to use an image that would not be realistic. When you write a dialogue, hello, how are you? Then, of course, you don't get too far from this exchange of information at that stage. Just two remarks about what is unsaid. Technically, it would be possible. So what is unsaid in the human mind? It's the synapses, the billions of neurons that have not been verbalized. well, the bit rate of information in the spoken language, but there is something happening with the neurons. So the language model is also a neural network. It's hundreds of billions of synapses, and one layer generates a sequence, the flow. So in an interesting screenplay or a computer game, you could work with the inner state, the meaning of the word. Linguists would say it's the context where it's used. And neuroscientists would say it's the state of the brain and what you mean by the word. The second remark, we have said a language model. Maybe we should say what it is, okay? This language model, I say Emma mele in Czech. You can hear the syllable, some nonsense. I feel sorry for the interpreter. Quick brown frog jumps and so on, okay? Well, a kind of a linguistic model, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Yeah, again, a riddle and so on, a rhyming riddle. So that's something that you absorb as a child, and in fact, that's the artificial language model, an artificial network, a computational mechanism. So you feed the network some text, you say or some kind of syllables, and in fact the network will add something because it will generate it from these children's rhymes. In other words, the network will absorb the text and compress them. So OpenAI has shown the company, if you take a small neural network, the model is boring, and they took a bigger hammer, more parameters, and they tested it on bigger text. And when they took huge computational elements and billions of parameters, and they put text from all over the internet, English, Czech, and so on, programming language on the internet, everything. And they said, okay, network, you have seen this X number of words, and we are now training it. You can say this first word. So in a way, it's quite trivial. And when you give steroids to the network, it has huge implications for AI and other cognitive sciences. So we can see that these capacities recall real intelligence, human intelligence. That means that a part of what we are in the language reality, we are this type of model. We generate sequences of words. So when I say a sequence of words, you realize, you know how to carry on. You tell me something, then you set up the billions of neurons, and the physical reality is merciless because the brain is like a machine. That's the language model. So these guys are playing with it. At this moment, we have neglected the topic of consciousness, and so you have said we should treat AI as if it really was a conscious element. Well, when I said it, oh my God, I don't know. Well, I mean general AI, we are not there yet. What we have now are a neuro AI and a narrow AI. So, what it is, the capacity to achieve a goal by efficiently compressing information. And narrow AI means when there is a specific goal, like you should win a chess game, park a car, translate this to another language. General intelligence would be how to achieve a potentially any goal, or to set a goal. For example, general intelligence would be human intelligence, but the space for general intelligences is huge. We are one of them. Also, in fact, this should be non-biologically. And when this is done, there is this consciousness, part of the computational process in our heads. We can say two things about consciousness. I am a person with consciousness, but we cannot really say it about a third person, another person. And also, it's the only thing you can say about yourselves, about consciousness. Everything else can be some just sensory errors. But when I believe that you are a conscious being, it must be the result of an evolutionary process and how to communicate. My machine in the head is set up in this way by thousands of years of evolution, because the societies of hominids and, apes and so on, in which the capacity has not developed to attribute consciousness, was not there. But I have a good model of your world, of what you want to do and why you do it. So in me there is the qualitative experience. And if I attribute it to you, 200 years ago, our ancestors could say that slaves brought from Africa could not feel pain. They did not have a conscious mind. This is a social, cultural thing to attribute consciousness to someone. If we had this concept of silica, the material, then there would be intelligence corresponding to human intelligence. Like when I speak to something, it speaks to me. So I don't have another way how to find it. So we could say that in dubio pro reo, we could suppose that it has the consciousness. If it didn't, we could hurt it. And if it had consciousness, if it possessed it, we could do something very problematic. But we cannot speak about consciousness in the language model. On the other hand, this model is at the germ of the future general intelligence. We'll go back to it, but we can get connected with the system in Prague at the Department of Mathematics and Physics. So we'll be able to see how it works. You can be involved, just like David. You can think in English, replica, a piece of dialogue, and we'll see what happens. David, can you explain the situation so that the viewers can think about it? So at this moment, I wanted to make a bit explosive so that it gets really interesting. We can see a confrontation of the robot with death. That's the first scene of the play. Robot enters the room of the master, who is ill and old. The master sits on the bed. Robot takes him by the hand. I remember how you jumped on the bed. You were full of beans. It's translated literally into Czech, although we say it differently. The master says, I am dying. So we can try it. We can mark what is bad or good. So, okay, we can click and say we want something different. So let's wait for a minute. Thanks to the web camera. You can see our AI writing.
Občas jde poznat, z čeho čerpal Doctor Who, má už opravdu hodně sérií.
I think Doctor Who has several series. Doctor Who appears in the robot's text. The version we worked with, it was not really able to finish the dialogues. Very often it doesn't matter where the situation happens, and the errors then make you do something about it. Maybe so. Let's brief the AI. What about the part with the finger? I don't know how. No, I'll not complicate it. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to say, a sentence? What we need is a couple of sentences to describe the situation, what is happening, and ideally 2 characters. Each of them will say something, and that's a kickoff. That's the beginning. When you start a sentence and you should say the next word, that's how it works. But of course, it can look 1,400 words into the past. It will check the words and decides what the next and the next and the next words could be. That's how AI writes a play. So it's like, dice, playing dice, and it's randomized. So, but a couple of times it happened, I corrected the robot and there was always the same offer. So I thought maybe this robot tries to tell me the first time was good. I want to keep it. And that he doesn't trust me. Okay, think about it. In the production, there is 8 scenes out of 50 written, okay? That's what I read. So when the text is generated so fast, so you could enter and enter, get more and more. At what moment you decide, no, the play is done, and we have a sufficient number of scenes? Of course, we had a timetable. So after months of generating situations, we wanted to confront it with something human, borderline situations, love, death, murder. That was the finger. And, well, the 50 scenes, there were fewer topics, but there were more options. And then together we discussed which situations would be the most interesting ones, and we wanted to find a system, to find the way of the robot. It was like the little prince and his travels, when the little prince meets various characters who say something about society. So that's what we did, finding a place in the world, some disillusionment, and the robot decides not to be a part of the human society. So we motivated the story to find a specific idea, a specific truth, and then to specify it for the actors. And during rehearsals, it was also made more specific. Now, the dramatic situation, the situation is defined by having persons in various positions. And what happens is so unbearable for the person. They have to change the relationship. So the situation can be affected by many factors. Time is a factor. I'm not going to give a lecture that we give to actors. So this is difficult to explain it, but what we look for is not a situation, but the basic situation. A child is in the playground, a pedophile comes and says something, the child answers, "Do you want to try it?" I would be afraid. And so we don't look for anything problematic. We look for an event that would help us to develop the dialogue. So please propose something, suggest something. I'll say it in Czech first. Situation: Jan wakes up on the hospital bed after a week-long coma and sees his girlfriend Jana. She's away, looks at him and expects he will speak. Well, Jane would be the girlfriend.
She's already awake and looks at him.
Now he says it in English. But you know what they say, 2 sentences.
Jasně. A teď ta první replika bude Překvapuje mě, že nemáš nohy.
I'm surprised you don't have legs, Peter says.
Surprised you have no legs. A Jana říká,
Jane says, if you are surprised, I have bad news for you.
Tak vypadá to dobře, než to odpálím.
On už ten úvod byl, jak kdyby ho psal jako Petr.
The introduction was always as if written by GPT. This is something we are working on for the new version. We want to generate these things automatically. We have a really very succinct brief, the name of the play, a scene, and that will already start a synopsis. So you give it to the model, and then the dialogue is generated. So we are getting some random things. We are training this on film screenplays. Yeah, but we want to minimize human intervention. Now it's 10%, it could be 1%. If it's the robot learns from film screenplays, it's difficult to preserve the unity of a place and time. So in 10 seconds you jump from one setting to another. What I appreciate is the dialogues that preserve an idea. Sometimes an error is interesting, but if there are too many, then it's too tiresome. So in The Simpsons, you can take it, but not in like a 90-minute film. So we tried to be consistent. That's why we chose the format composed of situations where you could preserve the situation. And sometimes we had to do a lot of corrections. We had a robot which went to the labor office seeking a job seeker. We had several programs with text of the plays and with the interventions. So after the debate, you can look at the screenplays, and we'll also have it online. Here it is.
Tohle by se třeba dalo určitě na jevišti realizovat.
I'm sure this could be done on stage. Now, sorry, because I cannot see the screen. Thank you, Mrs. Hawking is in the text. Sometimes there are names that we know from The Simpsons or Doctor Who, or names we don't know where the AI found them, or the system can make up anything. So we try this model on stage, and what you see there, in fact, there's a different ratio. The intervention of humans is enormous, because to inspire life to the situation means that you produce something that will make sense. The text is what we are investigating. Can AI write a play? But you cannot figure it out from the production. As we know from various theaters, you can stage the telephone directory in a way, but what we care about is not how well to stage a bad text, but what to do to make the text better, and how to inspire the theater so that those who stage it don't have to really transform it. They get the fundamental impulse, and that's where we try to go. Start from situations. We try to develop a classic drama based on situations. We don't want a robot to write post-dramatic text. That has been done. So if I put Mrs. Hawking away, we'll see. Maybe Jane is Hawking. When we try to put in waiting for Godot, Vladimir, then he became Vladimir Putin. The model has read newspaper articles and has an idea of the world.
Třeba říct vlastně úplně laicky teda k tomu jazykovému modelu jako z mýho pohledu.
So about the language model, you said that you put in a word based on the probability of what should come next. That means that, I don't know, Hawking, comma, and so on. So maybe that's why the name Hawking appeared. Or if you have a man or a woman, then I love you appears sooner or later, because that's really, when you look at screenplays, then you have love in all screenplays. And very often there is some violence, especially at the beginning, before we use the feedback. Sex, love, violence were the most frequent topics. So we are discussing artificial intelligence, but more than AI, we learned about ourselves, which topics are the most frequent ones. So sometimes you criticize the software, but it starts with humans. We also got a negative feedback, and the play is partly sexist and so on. There are stereotypes, and that's because the model learns from texts produced by people, so all the biases are learned by the system, and they are even made deeper and reiterated. So this is a sphere of research which is very complicated, but how to learn the models to be better than people, not to have biased ideas. In AI, this can be done. Mathematical fairness, it's very difficult. But when you have a human being which will not use the racist model implanted in the head, you cannot do anything about it. But if you have a model based on neuron networks, you can change it. And the same goes for the linguistic model. what to do, how not to generate racist models, but you can still do something about it. An important thing which you cannot see in this generation of the text, you can say it's not AI, I can do it too. Maybe you could see it in the play, the first fragments of higher cognitive capabilities of GPT-2. You can write a text. My top 10 dishes. Number 1, and you give it to the model, and the model will write, blah, blah, blah. Number 2, GPT-2. How does it know it can count, you know, where counting happens? So there's not a loop 1 to 10. It's in the language model. So GPT-2 counts 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 3, 8. But it's like children calculate, you know, 1, 2, 3, 8, 4, and so on. There is Megatron 11, which you can try it on a website. It can count to 10. 10 reasons why I hate you. 1, and so on. So this is incredible. If you download AI Dungeon, then if you remember old text messages, you are in a cave, you can go north and so on. It's a game generated by a similar model. And there are endless worlds, and the system will generate on the fly new realities. It can preserve it consistently. Then there is another step forward, GPT-3. It can see 10.
Je to tak? Vidíte to? Ale tam by to chtělo to ještě nějak narušit. Řekněme 10 věcí,
let's disturb it. 10 things no one has said, my most 10 something. You know, it could be in the text. Here, the robot copied it from the internet, and when we say the most and whatever, the AI should always count to 10. That's a great capability. So in GPT-3, a month ago, when we worked on the detection of fake news, so we tried if GPT can write fake news, Sputnik and parlamentní listy, they can dismiss all the writers because GPT-3 writes very convincing texts. But we want to use the model to detect fake news. So we said, GPT-3, can it identify an aggressive sentence? So from the magazine Sputnik, we found some articles. Václav Moravec receives, he's a TV anchor, he receives many hates. Or when Barack Obama somewhere is again many hates. So you copy an article, translate it in Google Translator, and you write a text. Identify the aggressive sentence, text, then you copy-paste the text, and you say aggressive sentence, and you show what the aggressive sentence is, like, you know, have like, well, some curses. Then you write text again, a new article, which you download, and again you say aggressive sentence, and you give it to GPT-3. GPT-3 finds an aggressive sentence in this article. It's zero-shot learning. That hasn't been in AI. That's how I change an aggressive sentence. But you need contextual comprehension, and the system can only predict the next word. But still, the capability is there. The story is in Microsoft research, we speak to a person who puts it into the AP, and the person made a mistake and we sent him 20 articles and wanted to see whether the aggressive sentence will be chosen. And when we looked at it, we said, this is perfect, Article 1, again, aggressive sentence, selected. And then, after 1 hour, we thought there was something strange about the text. So we looked at the text, and the Microsoft person made a small mistake. He misunderstood us. He didn't know. He got 20 files. He only got one text with the aggressive sentence. He set up the GPT parameters, so the AI was quite creative, and the GPT-3 had a sample of one text, aggressive sentence, and he generated all the others. He generated 20 fake news articles, put an aggressive sentence into it, then he showed what the aggressive sentence was without us noticing that the article was generated by this computer. So we were really astonished. That means, these hyper levels, how to keep them consistent. Well, that's just, something to say. Now we are again looking at the scene. There are recipes, chocolate with mayonnaise. Melt chocolate, put it on the toast, and mayonnaise on top. So here the experiment with counting doesn't work. Maybe after 100 pages it will say, and point 2. In a legal document, maybe you don't read them. I add the AI Act, the EU Act. So you have the preamble, we, the European Commission, blah, blah. We are in the situation that 39 pages of explanations, then comma, we have come to the conclusion, so it can be similar. Let me now ask about the general artificial intelligence. Do you think that one day the general artificial intelligence will ask about the meaning of its existence? Yes, it can happen, but we should not imagine robots. That's one of the biggest mistakes when visualizing AI. What we create is an alien, a real alien. The design space of intelligent entities is huge. And we are at just one point. So this design room is quite variable. But we know that crabs evolved several times in different places. So this design exists several times. If an alien landed, maybe the alien would look like a crab. So if a living organism has something to watch, it looks like eyes, if it eats, it looks like a mouse, more or less, or also an ass. Do you know the film The Alien? It's not the alien. It's a metaphor of the nightmare. It's visualized like a nightmare, something coming from us. But we design an intelligent entity that will be optimally created. Evolution is an optimum process. COVID was also evolved like that. The more we get infected, we create a hardware for the optimization process. We are the hardware. When you get infected, so you work as a part of computation. And what we do, the design space, there are different optimization characteristics, reinforcement learning. That means we converge into convert into a situation when we'll have a computational system that will implement artificial intelligence. It will not be compatible with anything that originated in evolution. Everything that in the history of life has been seen is entity created by optimization in the evolutionary process. Sharks and whatever, or disasters. We understand them because our ancestors saw these disasters. Like in the Trinity test during World War II, there was a nuclear reaction. For the first time, we did this nuclear reaction, otherwise it's synthesis in the universe. So for the first time in the universe, we could say that we'll see something that was not created by the evolutionary way. So there will be different questions, no interface. Thank you very much. It says image credit, iStock. Well, maybe the texts have not been filtered so well. You know, even something silly appears in the OpenAI model. But GPT-3 would not do this. Thank you, and now it's up to the audience. I wanted to ask, will you model the outcome on the basis of the input data? If you look for a classic drama, do you put in such text to correspond to the output? Because now you have internet text. We know that the quality varies, but if you look for good quality, the premise would be that you insert quality data. Yes, you understand it very well. In machine learning, the result can be only as good as the input data. If you have a weird text, then weird texts will come out. We didn't do it in the first version And that means this will be difficult in terms of computing to train the model. We don't have the hardware, so we are trying to train the model. It has read millions of text, and we can add some text, and it will be tuned up. So we had some preliminary outputs. We gave the AI some plays, but there were some problems, availability of data, because there is copyright. So we cannot use plays of authors who have not been dead for 80 years. So we used older plays, and then the language is a bit different, like an old play. And maybe the actors would not care for it so much. So that's the problems we have. Copyright that does not expect this usage. Copyright thinks someone will read it, someone will act in it, and not that someone will use 1,000 plays and transform them. So these are the limits. But it's interesting, you know, the matter of copyright. I talked to the head of Delia, which is the author's agency, and we discussed the text you saw today. Who is the author? So will there be intellectual property or not? And that's a very hard question. In fact, that's how it has been answered. At the moment, there are not many statements about it, and it generates new questions. So at this moment, this play does not have an author. This is a language model that we use with a license. But what is created, it's not the work of an author. If someone could be called an author, it would be the 10% put in by David, the dramaturge. As a matter of fact, it's as if we wanted to accuse an author for plagiarizing something because he has read several hundreds of plays and so on. So I'd like to know if there is a playwright who has never written, who has never read another play and has not been influenced. So this is a shared experience. And to be original at present means creating one's own algorithms. This afternoon we were speaking about it. When you look at the House of Cards, you can see Macbeth in it, and even dialogues that are copied from Macbeth. When you look at Blue Jasmine, you can see Tennessee Williams, Match Point, you know, it's Crime and Punishment. So even a living person can use these previously seen images, and sometimes even unconsciously uses it in music. There is hardly anything original. So you can expect that in music AI must be even more perfect. It's mathematics. Spotify, as a product for musicians, will offer this. All the algorithms want data. They want feedback. That's where is behind. The human being produces feedback all the time. When you look at Spotify, and you produce some music, and again, you know when people listen to it, what type of people. So this can be used very interestingly. Adobe would like to do it in visual arts, but there it's more difficult. The loop is slow, and in theater also. About your question, the Czech Republic, there is a book by Jiří Materna, The Poetry of the Artificial World. I'm sure you can get it. He took a simple model based on graphemes, and he scraped the web of so-called písmák, old website where teenagers write. I also sent some text there. And it's still there for years. He downloaded it and he taught a network about it. So in the book you have some great Dadaist teenage stuff, very original, and it writes poems. And these poems are very short, so it's one thing how the models develop, what kind of context they can process. 10 years ago, we could automatically generate one sentence that wouldn't collapse, and Jiří Materna could do these poems, and now we can do several pages of a text. We do scenes, not the entire play. And Materna got 1,000 poems and chose 20 good ones. And poems, you know, they can do anything. Not in a play, but what is bizarre is good. If it's a manual for a washing machine, no. Yeah. So it's a matter of poetry and drama, why it can work. It's a discussion whether there is a stimulus behind it, what makes you write the text, or when you read it, whether there is a response you can interpret. And you see the idea, you are provoked, you have emotions. So that's good for poetry. And drama, it also works, but the longer the text is, the more you realize that the ideas are not so consistent. That was our problem. So the impulse is missing that will be consistent in the text, so that we could see that the impulse, we had to put the impulse in. Just want to say that when we were asked to do the project, we were not just, not enthusiastic. We said, no, this is not possible. We don't believe it can happen. So we tried it. So for myself, I want to say this is not the way the theater will go. Not at this moment.
právě ta komplikovanost toho.
And the fact that it's so complicated, the drama, what's happening with drama before an audience can see it, that's our great advantage. So I think we'll have to do it, we the humans, for some time. Yes, people will write plays for some time. Yeah, some of us hope that one day a robot will write a play, a wonderful play, and the other half in us believes, no, a robot will never write it. That's why this debate is so stimulating. But I think it will never happen, because art is something that people defend. So, not speaking about the soul, but there is something in us, and also we are vain. We don't want to be presented that we just clicked out a text or say, I have written it, even though perhaps I have seen so many plays. It's not just clicking. Yeah, okay, your work is quite safe. You are safe in terms of AI. People will want to see plays written by other plays. They will want to go to real physicians who will get advice from AI, but they will want to talk to a real doctor. Maybe for some time people will watch AI-generated things, but then they will go back to human things. My profession is in danger. Sorry for speaking about GPT-3. GPT-3 can do the programming. You will say use HTML code or JavaScript, a window, 3 buttons, blue, red, green. One will be happy, sad, and something. And then show the text of what I clicked on. And in JavaScript, you will get a code, and that's what the computer does. And no one has taught the system to do the computation, and they can do it. So people will not care, are these shows written by computers, but computational linguistics is a bit above it, but software development, I don't know. So do you feel now that we are getting to know how are you afraid? Depends of what. Yeah, I feel some fear. Yeah, I do. Because when you are speaking about it, I am afraid. I don't even have to say what I'm afraid of, but I do feel a bit scared of the success of AI. But, of course, it brings some existential risks. Not to speak the doom and gloom things. Of course, existential risks. There is a book about The Precipice. In this book, he says what can happen with AI. But we are now at the precipice. And if it ends well, what can happen next will surpass what we could think about the future of mankind. We cannot extrapolate future of mankind in 100 years. Homo sapiens has been here for 2,000 years. 160 years have not been very interesting. Maybe discovery of Australia. Then there was wheat, grain, and the last 2,000 years, the last 100 years, last 10 years, we'll have GPT-4. And if it doesn't get bad, what will the future be in the situation when AI will replace humans in cognitive work? So there will be material surpluses, will not have to live from birth to death, will not be forced to work. But what are we going to do with our lives if we are not to spend them working from birth to death, and after retirement feel sorry? What will life be about? Or in the situation when we bring a non-evolutionary made entity, what will the relationship be? So we are getting to these questions, and so if we don't perish, humankind will move to such a level that it will be scary. It will be a huge step. There's a chance 1 to 6 that will be extinct. So how to, well, 1 to 6, how to be optimistic at the end of this discussion? All right, it's very late, so thank you. Yeah, we'll be around if you want to talk to us. I'd like to thank David Košťák, Daniel Hrbek, Jan Romportl, and also RUR. Thank you.